All right, it's 16 minutes after 4 o'clock. The Madlanga Commission has adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow morning. Vusumuzi Ket Matlala has now been excused. There you see him on your screen conferring with his lawyer, Advocate Van den Heerfer, of course, also pointing out that Matlala would also need time to prepare for his ongoing trial. Essentially today, he continued to respond to questions around his relationship with various law enforcement and security industry persons. He's been asked about his relations with Steve Mutsumi and General Sinona earlier on. And of course, on the latter, he says that General Sinona wanted him to get Ishmael Nangi, who was his neighbor at the time, to drop complaints against Sinona's team. Matlala confirmed that it was Sinona's team that conducted Nangi's arrest. General Sinona then had testified previously that he had only wanted to warn Matlala at the time that he was living next door to an accused kidnapper. Of course, a number of other names being dropped, including Calvin Rafadi. You will recall, of course, that testimony from Witness X around that relationship between Calvin Rafadi, a commentator, as it were, with Ket Matlala. Thembekile Mrototo monitoring those developments for us will then give us a wrap. Thembekile, good afternoon to you. So, of course, Ket Matlala back at the Madlanga Commission tomorrow. His counsel has, of course, raised a concern that at some point the Madlanga Commission would need to release him as he has to prepare for his trial. A trial he's mentioned several times here at the Madlanga Commission, of course, saying that he does not want to answer questions that will then, reveal some of the legal strategy around that particular trial. Just give us a sense then of just those key highlights from today's proceedings.
Well, Nati, hi again. So, Vusumuzi Ket Matlala's appearance at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry will not continue tomorrow. In fact, what's going to happen is it's now going to be postponed indefinitely. His legal team and the evidence leaders will then figure out a date because, as you were saying, on Monday he goes back to his trial, which Advocate Van den Heerfer, appearing here for Vusumuzi Ket Matlala, said they absolutely need to focus on. He's a man really beset by multiple legal problems. He's got an attempted murder charge or a case going on one hand. He's also been accused of corruption in a separate matter related to the Medicare 24 investigation, which has also come up in the evidence here at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. Let's bring in SABC News senior reporter Canny Maphanga, who's with me at the Bridget Mabandla Justice College. Canny, let's talk about what's happened this afternoon, the issue of the meetings, the conversations in Durban, Matlala, the KZN Police Commissioner, Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, and these alleged payments that were allegedly made to the suspended Deputy Police Commissioner, Shadrack Sibiya.
Well, absolutely. I think there was an advancement made on the allegations surrounding some high-ranking generals, but still you're seeing a witness who refuses to engage on the alleged network, because it seemed that the commission was getting close to who these alleged cartel members could be and how the network functions. But you can see he's very stubborn about that particular issue. But I think a very important element was added to the discussion from the point of view of this meeting that took place at the Pearls in Mhlanga and KZN. And that is where Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi alleged that certain things were revealed in that meeting that speak to Lieutenant General Shadrack Sibiya. You do remember that when Major General Sinona was reading out that text from KZN Top Cop Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, he was very afraid of mentioning the name of Steve Mutsumi. And that's the sense that I get from Ket Matlala as well, because it's quite interesting to see him be willing to address the allegation that Lieutenant General Shadrack Sibiya was allegedly collecting money through his alleged middleman, Sergeant Fani Nkosi. He's very comfortable with that particular revelation, but where he draws the line is speaking on the alleged source of the money that is being collected. We know that in the evidence or the statement that was read out with respect to Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, that it was being alleged that Matlala told Mkhwanazi that allegedly Mutsumi was allegedly giving Sibiya money, or Sibiya was allegedly collecting money from Mutsumi. But here he has no recollection of that event, and it takes us back to Major General Sunona when he was terrified of even mentioning the name, even to the extent where he made the commission grab the phone, write it down on a piece of paper, and eventually the commission ruled that you can actually say this name. And here you have another person who is alleged to actually be a cartel member.
Right.
And he's refusing to engage that name as well in terms of the allegations. But at the very least, they advance to the extent where he pretty much confirms that allegation about Lieutenant General Shadrack Sibiya, and there is some form of credence to the kind of alleged shield and what may have been informing that particular shield. But outside of that particular major discovery, really the commission goes nowhere with respect to the alleged network and how deep the alleged web is with these key individuals that seemingly hold the funds, and how that translates or how that gains them a shield from these high-ranking generals.
I think it's then worth explaining, Canny, especially because, the commission has now been sitting for many months, and there might be people who've heard the name of Steve Mutsumi during Matlala's appearance this week wondering, who is Steve Mutsumi, and why would at least two people who we're told are influential and powerful be so afraid, as it would appear, of implicating him in any of their testimony?
Well, I actually don't think that we have a clear understanding of who Mr. Steve Mutsumi is, other than him being a businessman. But what we do see is that he features in different themes in the evidence before the probe, even down to the chats of the late Jotan Msazi Msibi. You see them booking flights together. You see them discussing a possible deal, it seems. And Advocate Chaskison goes into great detail about the alleged grabbers procurement, and how allegedly Sergeant Kosi was the SABC official that was used to legitimize that procurement of those high-level security technologies. And the idea was for a joint business venture between the late Mswazi and Mr. Mutsumi to allegedly sell those to the Kingdom of Eswatini. And the latest instance in which you heard from him was a text message to Lieutenant General Matlala Mkhwanazi. And then, of course, now here, where Cat Matlala is even refusing to even heed to any suggestion that places Steve Mutsumi anywhere near that allegation of Sibiya allegedly collecting money through an alleged middleman. But outside of that, there isn't much that has been said about this particular businessman, and there isn't really an explanation as to why Major General Lesotho Sonona had such a fear about saying his name on the record here before the Madlanga Commission. And it's quite clear that Cat Matlala did not want to entertain any suggestion surrounding that particular name, but was very happy to offer that information, and actually very comfortable to offer that information. And I say that in light of the fact that for the past few days it's been a bit of a circular kind of testimony where he kept invoking his right against self-incrimination, and this is something that he was willing to at least let the commission in on a little bit, and I think it's quite a significant piece of information to offer to the commission. But he draws the lines at who the possible names are. So it leaves the commission a bit stagnant on the alleged network, if any exists, but we're starting to get an understanding of these high-ranking generals and how they allegedly got caught up in this alleged web.
And on that point, if the conversations that Matlala says he was having with the KZN Police Commissioner Mkhwanazi were about monies collected by Shadrack Sibiya, that suggests that there may have been an element of criminality there, am I right? Because what would the Deputy National Commissioner of Police be collecting money for from people?
That's directly what the implication of that evidence is that if he was allegedly collecting money, then you're now in the realm of alleged unlawful conduct, and it's about establishing what would have been the purpose for that alleged money, what would have been the benefits, what would have been the give back, let's put it that way, if indeed that was the scenario. And to have someone on the other side confirming that a third party told him of this is something that the Commission has to take into consideration when it makes its final conclusions, keeping in mind there's already a lot of evidence that paints Sergeant Kosi as an alleged middleman. He came under oath here to state that everything that he did, or every conversation that he had with alleged cartel member Vusumuzi Cat Matlala, was allegedly on behalf of Lieutenant General Shadrack Sibiya. We know Sibiya denied it when he was here on the stand for 5 days, but there were impalas on that property. There was a message saying, tell Kat to make a turn. So there is some kind of a relationship there. It's about whether or not, or rather, the Commission will take it seriously that Kat Matlala, who is alleged to be part of this cartel, this alleged cartel, states under oath that allegedly Sabia was collecting money, allegedly through his middleman, Sergeant Fani Nkosi. The only thing that Kat Matlala cannot be drawn on is who is the source of that money.
Interesting, because Kat Matlala and Ndandla Mkhwanazi don't agree on much. You could even take it further and say they can't stand each other. But the one thing they seem to agree on is their contradiction of the now former head of the Hawks and KZN, General Sinona, on the issue of the meeting that took place in Durban, where he was in the same apartment, but he told the Commission that he actually doesn't know what was being discussed. But Mkhwanazi and Matlala say, well, that's impossible, based solely on the size of the space where these conversations are happening.
And I think the design of the apartment itself shows that even if he was near the kitchen, I think that's where he alleged to have been. It's such an open plan apartment that it would have been impossible to have not heard what they were discussing or to have not known what the purpose of that particular meeting was and why he chose to bring Kat Matlala to a meeting with Lieutenant General Ndandla Mkhwanazi. Certainly, Sonona is done with his evidence. We know that Mkhwanazi will return. And at this stage, with Kat Matlala going back to his trial and his legal team making it clear that that is their primary focus at this stage, I don't see the trial ending soon, but I do know there is supposed to be some kind of a break mid-September. And whether or not that is an opportune time for him to return is something that you'll have to see in the future. But I think the Commission has enough to understand what alleged a cartel member of Vusumuzi Kat Matlala's role is in this entire saga. The only thing that's left is establishing whether or not there was an alleged link to the police minister Senzo Mchunu. But in terms of the relationships with the high-ranking generals, I think the inferences there are quite clear.
And the quid pro quo question came up. Matlala told Advocate Hassim he does not speak Latin, but what would he, from what the different versions presented to the Commission, what would he and Ndandla Mkhwanazi have wanted from each other in the first place to warrant a meeting? Because the Sibia name, giving up Sibia there for possible arrest or prosecution, has been one of the suggestions.
Well, there's been a number of allegations about what was suggested about each party and what they wanted. And I think there was one suggestion that he just had to give up the name of Lieutenant General Shadrik Sibia. There's another suggestion that Kat Matlala needed help with his contract. So only the three of them know really what the purpose of that meeting was. But I did hear evidence where Lieutenant General Ndandla Mkhwanazi intimated, or at least it was in the text message, I think, that there was a recording of the said meeting. And we haven't heard it here before the Madlanga Commission, and it's not clear whether or not it will be provided so that there's an understanding of what was discussed in that particular meeting. But outside of the three of them, they're the only ones that know what the purpose of that particular meeting was, and the most plausible version will win in that particular regard.
So lastly then, there are loose ends still to be tied up, because we know Matlala, as you were just saying, Canny, his testimony at the Commission has been put on pause indefinitely to allow him time to deal with his criminal trial that starts on Monday. But when he comes back, what other avenues, what other issues, from what we've heard since the start of the Commission, would the evidence leaders still need to traverse?
Well, I think in the main, the high-ranking generals that he had to answer to, which was Major General Sinona and Sibia, there is some kind of an idea there. But there's certainly other issues, outstanding issues, where he wasn't as candid as he could be, such as the Medicare 24/4 case, because he states, or rather invokes that right against self-incrimination, because we know that is still an ongoing matter. And it's unlikely that by the time he is expected to, or where the gap opens to return, that these matters would be done or any investigations would be concluded with respect to Matlala. I think that particular journey is just starting for him, and it's unclear where you'll ever get him in a position where he can speak candidly about matters that not only could incriminate him, but seemingly what the biggest risk here is for him that's showing up in the pattern is that how can this evidence that he is set to speak on allegedly incriminate other individuals that he really does not want to incriminate. And that's really what's emerging from his testimony. And I don't see a pattern changing even if he comes mid-September to return to the probe.
Canny Maphanga, SABC News senior reporter. That's a good point where we will leave it in terms of what's likely to come next when Matlala does return to the Commission. If we do get there, given the limited time that it's got until the extension it was granted by President Cyril Ramaphosa, that's the Commission, to submit its final report. I think that's supposed to happen in November now. So who knows if the schedule will allow enough time to deal with the outstanding issues that Canny was just talking to us about, especially through the appearance of Matlala as a witness back here in the box. But it remains an issue firmly on the table, and now we wait to hear from the evidence leaders and Matlala's lawyers on whether they've been able to find a date for that to continue. The SABC News team, as always, back here at the Madlanga Commission from 6 a.m. tomorrow morning with the Morning Live crew, and then we'll pick it up in the afternoon.
Thembekile, thank you so much for that, and thanks for that correction. Of course, the Madlanga Commission does return indeed tomorrow at 9:30, and of course, Matlala a date of return is yet to be determined.